everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we'll be discussing the astrology for the week of February 19th, 2018, and what we have titled, Getting in the Flow. So the purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about today are Venus conjunct Neptune and square Mars, which we've titled Getting in the Flow. We'll also talk about Mercury sextile Saturn and conjunct Neptune, which is all about learning with ease. And then we'll talk about the Sun sextile Saturn, which is about success and follow through. Mm-hmm. So we're excited to talk about these aspects with you. Please note that some of these will influence you more than others based on what's literally happening in your life right now and your personal astrological makeup. Always notice what resonates with you most and use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off this week's episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects, although I don't think we have any this week. It is kind of, we fit them all into the episode. Yep. So for all you astro geeks out here, here's what the moon's going to do. So our lunar lady is currently in her waxing phase as we start out the week in the pioneering sign of Aries, before she moves into the stability of Taurus on Tuesday. She then carries on into the busy sign of Gemini on Thursday, before moving into sensitive waters of Cancer on Saturday, where she's going to remain for throughout the weekend. So Shawna, share with us what we're featuring for this week's quotes.
Yeah, so this episode features quotes and inspiration from the American painter Alyssa Monks. And I came across her kind of randomly. Her paintings have this very mesmerizing, dreamy, ethereal quality to them. And she often will paint a person, a human figure that's obscured or immersed in water or steam. And so I thought she was a really perfect symbol, and especially her work a perfect symbol for this week that is very Piscean. And we have a lot of Pisces, we have a lot of Neptune going on. So excited to feature some of her thoughts and musings here today.
Yeah, I think the pick was perfect, Shawna, because I took a look at her art because I wasn't familiar with her. And yes, definitely that Neptunian, watery, abstract, very, very beautiful stuff. So good feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we're excited to jump in with everyone. One last note before we do, want to give a shout out to our patrons and our listeners. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here with us.
Yes, thank you very much. Without you, we couldn't do it, or we'd have no one to do it for, I suppose.
No one would be listening.
No one could be listening. What fun would that be? So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely not as much fun. And then also to become a patron of this podcast to show your appreciation and get our super cool show notes, you can go to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com. And so that all the information is there. You can also just connect with us and say hi on our main page on Facebook and Instagram. Had like a brain hiccup there. I'm like, wait, what am I saying?
Where are we going?
So we're under Feminine Principle Podcast on either Facebook or Instagram.
Yes, so there's plenty of ways you can find us, and we are grateful that you do. So with that being said, let's get into this very intriguing week that we have before us, this getting into the flow. So our first segment we're going to talk about is Venus, who's going to be conjuncting Neptune in Pisces, and then squaring Mars in Sagittarius. And also note we have our first quarter moon in Gemini that will be happening this week. So we're going to pepper in some of that as well. And so this is likened to our main title, and that is Getting in the Flow. So some exacts on that. We have Venus conjunct Neptune first on Wednesday, February 21st at 10:42 a.m. Pacific time, which is 6:42 p.m. Universal time. And then Thursday, the 22nd at 4:42 a.m. Aussie Eastern Standard Time. And that conjunction will happen at 13 degrees Pisces. Then we have Venus square Mars on Sunday, February 25th at 4:01 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 12:01 p.m. Universal Time, and then 10:01 p.m. Aussie Eastern Standard Time. And that will happen at 18 degrees Pisces and Sagittarius. And then lastly, that first quarter moon is kind of sandwiched in the middle. So that moon is going to happen in Gemini on Friday, February 23rd at 12:09 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 8:09 a.m. Universal Time and 6:09 p.m. Aussie Eastern Standard Time. And that first quarter will happen at 4 degrees Gemini. So Shawna, kick us in with your first quote.
All right. So this, again, is by the painter Alyssa Monks. Creativity isn't something we can stalk. It's like happiness or passion or comfort. We can't will it. We can only make space for it and allow it to occur by removing the blockages. The biggest block to creativity is the egoic mind. Unfortunately, we can't will that to go away either. Our ego is what is wanting the creativity in the first place. So my solution through the back door is to focus on gratitude and curiosity, shifting the focus away from an outcome or result of creativity and instead of what is already here to enjoy and savor. And so I know that's a long one, but I think it is totally perfect for this particular combination where we have Venus conjunct Neptune, which Venus is about the things that we love and appreciate. It's about attraction, and it's also related to anything artistic that we're doing in our lives. And then Venus is conjunct Neptune, which Neptune is about dissolving things. Neptune is also heavily about creativity and connecting with something etheric, something that just comes in that we feel at a very intangible level. And then the square to Mars is like we're fired up about it. There's that passion as well. And so I think that we may be feeling like there's something that we want to create at a more practical level. Maybe it is a piece of art, but like there's something inside of us. There's some kind of creative musing that is that's coming up this week.
Yes, there has to be with all these Neptune transits that we're going to be talking about. Something is coming up, and creativity can definitely be part of that. And I love this quote, Shawna, because I love the idea of not, that we can't stalk creativity. And stalking seems to be a very Mars type of, energy versus this Venus, which is here to more receive and like bring in. And so it is interesting because, it's true. We drive ourselves to connect with that spirit and that creativity and that inspiration for projects and, love affairs or whatever it is that we're kind of drawn into there. Because there's definitely a romance to this week. Wouldn't you say, Shawna? With all the Neptune and the Venus and all.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that could be romance in, in the literal sense where we're feeling more romantic and squishy and warm and fuzzy than normal. And I think it could also just be romance in that we're feeling like we're in love with life, or that could be, I think the other aspect of Neptune is that maybe there's a little bit of mental fogginess or confusion or seeing things maybe not in the way that they are in reality. So I think it could go a lot of many different ways, but definitely this like romantic view on life in general this week.
Yes, that's a very true point. Because, romance, I was about to say romance ideally is idealism. I mean, not completely because, romance is being in the moment for the most part. And it doesn't have to be, what am I looking for? It doesn't have to be, romance isn't necessarily practical. It can be, depending on if you have certain romantic tendencies that like practicalities. But usually that romantic vibe, whether it's in a relationship or having a romantic view of the world, and, it stems from kind of an idealistic version or being in a moment or being present with something that is could be an ideal, and it's okay in that moment. But I think a lot of this week we can like embrace the romanticism of this week, but know that maybe a lot of things that are coming down right now are not necessarily how we'll see them as time goes on. It's almost like this week is meant to be kind of enjoyed in some way that might not be permanent. Does that make sense? I mean, kind of, but not really with the Saturn. And that's what I'm noticing here is this week seems to have like a practicality to it versus like more of a non-practical illusory sense, you know? So yeah, I might be getting a little off course here, but let's go back to the romanticism and just Pisces in general, and the fact that we have a Pisces stellium going on. We have the Sun in Pisces, we have Mercury in Pisces, which we'll be talking about in the next segment, Neptune, of course, which is highlighted this week, and then Venus exalted in a nice high position that she likes as well. So Shawna, what do you think about all this Pisces energy that we got going on?
Yeah, so this is the thing with Pisces is it is very idealistic. It is like Pisces energy tends to look to the most beautiful and to lift things up, to be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, or this can be amazing. It's the classic idealism. The thing is, like you're saying, our ideals are not necessarily practical. Our ideals are not necessarily possible all the time, although it may feel that way in the moment. And what I'll also say about Pisces, the image that always comes to mind when I think about Pisces is making a sandcastle at the beach. And so it reminds me of kind of what you're talking about, where there is something that we may want to create in this moment, in this week, and it's this cool little sandcastle, and it's beautiful and amazing and creative, and we can put little shells on it, and maybe we find a crab and we throw that in there, and it's like, yeah, this is so amazing. But it's not a solid structure. It's going to get washed away at some point. And that's not to say that the things that we're doing now are meaningless. It's more about the experience, because you have a memory of building that sandcastle. Like this, I'm realizing too that I'm biased growing up near the ocean, but some of my most sweet memories are like building sandcastles at the sand and playing in the sand. I don't have anything to show for that, but I have my memories, and those are very valuable and those are very important. And there's a certain feeling that's evoked when I think about those things. And so I think that's the kind of thing that I'm feeling. That's the kind of theme for this week, is that this week is more about the experience than what it is that what it is that's tangible. That being said, I do think that also Pisces can tend to be not in the moment. Pisces energy can have us like thinking about the past, thinking about the future. And sometimes that is helpful. Sometimes it is a distraction also. So that, like, I think it could go either way, something to pay attention to on where our focus is.
Yes, that is very true. And with any sign, there's always two sides of the coin for the most part. And I think, but I like what you were saying in the first place, and how with the sandcastles and kind of indulging in the creation of memories, because of a lot of these Neptune and transits and this Pisces energy is kind of asking us to merge with the moment in a sense, because Pisces is about merging, or any water signs, like it flows together. It likes to connect and be, a one. It's one body of water. Like there's not individual droplets. No, they all make up this one individual or this one piece of water. And so I think that there is this theme of merging this week with something. And, Pisces does have the warning, the disclaimer. There's a, parental warning on the box of Pisces that says, beware of the potential of rose-colored glasses after the fact. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy it in the moment. And that's the thing. We just got to release any type of expectation and just, embrace that ability to connect and merge, either with our own creativity or with another person, or what, what Venus represents for you, because to pair in that, that square to Mars, that's going to be happening later on in the week. So basically, we're going to conjunct Neptune first. We're going to feel very dreamy, very idealistic. We might want to run away with our sweethearts and go escape reality in some way, go escape to the beach, take a long walk on the beach. You probably couldn't do anything more appropriate for that transit than to, sit in a hot tub. I'm always back to the hot tubs. But Venus, but Venus squaring Mars later on in the week is kind of twofold. We have, like you were saying earlier, Shawna, we have that passion that is aroused when we have Venus squaring Mars. But looking at the passion in relation to a Venus in Pisces versus a Mars in Sagittarius, there seems to be a slight theme of needing space versus merging in the theme a little bit with the square. Because, Sagittarius is very expansive, likes to go off and do whatever it wants. They're both mutable energies. So it's not directed in one way or the other. It kind of goes with the flow. That's why it's perfect that you titled, getting in the flow, because this is a very mutable week. So yeah, I think passions are going to be aroused, but at the same time, if we have any hidden tensions in some way in relation to our Venus and relationships or with our creativity and our receptive qualities, some tensions might surface at this time. So Shawna, what do you think about that passion, space versus merging, tensions,
all that fun stuff.
All that stuff.
Yeah. So I think, so Venus square Mars, that is a typical pattern of passion. And so I think, the passion can be, if you like that passion and it's conducive to what's happening and it's pleasant, that's great. However, it could manifest as more of like being annoyed by something. And I think that depends on the relationships that you're having right now. I think that this is what I'll say is if there is someone or something, if there's a situation that has already been agitating, I would imagine that this would amp up that situation. And because Mars is about action, Mars is also about drawing boundaries and asserting oneself. And Venus, especially Venus in Pisces, is like, I just want us all to get along and let's all be friends. Let's not talk about anything where we disagree. Let's just, sweep it under the rug and be happy and rosy and all of that good stuff. And so sometimes we do need to play the peacemaker. Sometimes we do need to say when something doesn't work for us. And so I think because it's a square shows where we may be confronted with both of these energies that feel like they conflict, but we can find a way to make it work for us. And so I see that really as being the focus this week of like, okay, where are we playing the peacemaker? Where are we saying what works for us and what doesn't work for us? And, how do we find a balance between those things? And, that's what I think about that.
Well, Sean, I think that's perfect for a couple reasons. And I think it's a perfect way to segue into us talking about that first quarter moon in Gemini and talking about saying what needs to be said or, communicating certain things, because we got to keep in mind when that first quarter moon happens, slightly after the first quarter moon, that moon will oppose Mars in Sagittarius. And it's probably going to kick up things during that time, which is roughly Friday, like the beginning of the weekend, Thursday, Friday. And so, first quarter moon is another call to action. It's another square, just like this Venus, square Mars. And so we're in a waxing phase. We're in a pushing phase. We're in a, taking action to turn the corner in some way. But we're turning the corner towards something greater or going forth with something rather than shutting something down like in that third quarter energy. And so with a first quarter moon in Gemini, of course, communications are going to be highlighted, I think. And so how we communicate within our partnerships, or how we communicate to our creativity, or communicate that to ourselves, is going to have a challenge later in the week. And okay, so why I wanted to bring this up, and we can talk about the first quarter moon a little bit more in detail. But I looked at the Sabian symbol for this, and it fit in so perfectly with what you're saying, Shawna. Mm-hmm. And that is for 5 degrees Gemini, it's a radical magazine. And yeah, what does that mean? A radical magazine. Well, obviously it's a magazine that is a little radical or has edgy views or what have you. And so the key word is tangency, and the theme is personal statements. And so the accent is on the freedom of speech and strong statements and extreme viewpoints that are likely to be heard. Because here we are talking about a Pisces-Sag combo, and both are very spiritual and have their own way of viewing things. Especially Sag can be very, can be dogmatic at times of how they view things or what it is they have to share. So there seems to be a note of... there's a positive side of us being able to share what it is we need to share with other people, or what it is we're thinking. And the opportunity there is to be, dare to be yourself and to do it your own way. And that speaks to the Sag a lot. But there's also the risk against guarding, we have to guard against attacking, the foundations or the belief systems of other people, or being insensitive to the rights of, others and their ability to form their own opinions or values around something. Shawna, what do you think about the Radical magazine and how, sharing our truths with people this week, basically?
Yeah. So I like that for Gemini, for the Gemini moon, and then especially this first quarter Gemini moon opposite Mars. That feels very appropriate because Mars is like, let me tell you all about it. Or I'm just going to do it. And then, you can find out about it through my actions. So what I'm thinking is it does feel as though there's something that needs to be said. There's something that needs to be acted upon. There are boundaries. There are decisions that need to be made. And I would say that may need to be done at the risk of jeopardizing the calm, still waters that we have. And I don't know that there may be a fear around saying something and then someone takes it the wrong way and then that relationship changes, or the dynamic changes, or there's a loss on opportunities because we say something. And so, how to say it. And Gemini moon is also very cerebral. It's very thinking all of the things, looking at all of the options, looking at all the possibilities. And so I think it's important to channel this energy. It's important to work out how we feel first. And what are all of the options? What are all the possibilities? If we approach a situation this way, what's the result? Are we okay with that? If we approach the situation a different way, what's the result? Are we okay with that? And I think that's the best way to approach this because the moon and Mars opposite, there is some kind of action that needs to be taken, and it's going to be through talking for sure. So it's what are we okay with? And, make peace with the result up front and then take the action.
I like that, especially with the sun in Pisces, because the sun is our awareness. It's the spotlight. It's where we're gaining, some type of awareness to a solution or what it is, we want to do, or a purpose in a situation. And so, feeling that out first, like you said, Shawna, how do we feel before fully communicating what that is, getting in tune with that. Seems right. And part of it could be, because Pisces is not always known to, go on in there and attack something, right? Might kind of be off in the, a little wallflowery off in the corner. Let me if I just, maybe it'll just happen to me. And so there could be this idea of like, you know, the need to communicate versus, you know, kind of avoiding the situation. We're kind of pushed into being like, okay, you got to speak your piece, but how do you do that? You know? And you know, so I guess, yeah. So communication, something, we're all going to be communicating something later on this week, and it's going to be, you know, a turning point in this story in a sense, and especially since we're still in eclipse period. I mean, we just got through that solar eclipse in Aquarius, but we're kind of riding that new moon energy. So we're setting up a story for this month in a way. But let's talk about these tarot cards real quick. There's a lot of energy going on here, and I drew the February. I don't know what the February is, but I drew the Emperor. I saw an F and I just went with it. The Emperor as the focus and the Seven of Pentacles as the grounding. And I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. This is like, you know, throwing in a whole nother completely different scenario here. But in some ways not really, because, you know, the Emperor is represented by Aries, which is in turn represented by Mars. And here we have Venus squaring Mars this week. So it has that kind of masculine bent to it, which is unique, especially since we're talking about Venus, when we're talking about more receptive qualities. So the first thing I will say about the Emperor is, you know, the Emperor, because it's kind of this masculine, authoritative energy that can just go out and make boundaries and rules and, you know, put everything into a nice little box, you know, that it works best for what its vision is and its, you know, its sense of leadership. Sometimes with that, you know, there can be insensitivity to others that come up, or we're so assertive that we become dogmatic in a way, which kind of speaks to that Sabian symbol we were just talking about. So that's to be looked for. But another part of it, especially since we're talking about creativity, and how Venus is really a creative energy, and especially with Neptune, and we're all in Pisces, you know, creativity is abound right now. So we might be challenged in some way to manifest, you know, that creative endeavor in a concrete way, or to build something, or to establish some type of structure, which speaks to the Saturn transits we're going to be having that we're going to talk about later in the episode. So I'm just wondering, you know, because the Seven of Pentacles is all about when we're taking a look at our work or what we build up. And that work can be done in relationships too. It's not just work that we're, you know, 9 to 5 or like a project we're working on. Relationships are work as well. And so we might be, you know, taking a look at our effectiveness in those scenarios, and whether we should plod the course with something, or maybe introduce something new, or a new project, or a new, you know, endeavor creatively together, or what have you. So I don't know. These are interesting cards. Shawna, I'd love to hear what you have to think about the Emperor and Seven of Pentacles.
Yeah. So these are not cards that I would expect for this transit and for this combination.
Yeah. No.
What I'm thinking though is I'm thinking that these cards are tying into the lunar cycle. Because the Emperor, even though that card in particular is traditionally ruled by the sign of Aries, the Emperor, it has this like patriarchal, even like the Jung would call it the animus. It's like this strong, concrete, masculine, authoritative energy. And it reminds me of Saturn, really. And we're in the lunar cycle of where we just had our new moon in Aquarius this month, and Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. And so it's like, okay, something has been built up. Like the Emperor is about structures that have been created, and there's a sense of power, there's a sense of authority that we have maybe around a certain situation. And that could be, you know, anything. It could be like a relationship that has become solid. It could become our expertise that has become solid. Like, where do we feel a sense of power and authority in our life? And the Seven of Pentacles is, like this, this reflection on what it is that we've built so far. And I think that ties into this first quarter moon in Gemini, where we're like, okay, wait, like what what are the options? What have we built? How do we want to move forward? Is there something that we need to do or say that's maybe a little bit different? Because Moon in Gemini is like all about changing it up. Mars in Sagittarius also, we have a whole lot of mutable energy. Mutable signs are about changing things and integrating things. And so I think that these cards are saying, yeah, like, let's look at what you've built, what you've created, and how do you want to move forward? What is the structure that's been created, and does that need to be changed? Does that need to be shifted? Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know, but it's definitely worth the look to see how we feel about things now.
I like that, Shawna, because it is true. The Seven of Pentacles is about the looking, it's the stopping, it's the processing, it's assessing when another opportunity comes along. So right now we're kind of checking our progress and figuring out what's next. What are we doing here? And so we may be evaluating where we want to use that emperor in some way. Like, how do we put some structure around it? How do I take a greater authority over my life? Put some boundaries in place. Be the leader for myself, basically. Or perhaps we've already used the emperor. We got out there, we put the boundaries, we're like, this, okay, that's how I want it. And now we're kind of evaluating how that affects us, or the moves that we've made affect us, or how they affect other people. Essentially, both of these cards seem to play to the idea of decisiveness, because the emperor is very decisive. Like, if it can put a boundary around something, or kind of box something in and take authority over a situation and lead, essentially, it has to be decisive in order to do so. And the Seven of Pentacles usually shows up when we have a moment of doubt or reassessment, because we've come so far, into what's next. And in order to figure out what's next, we got to be a little decisive. So it kind of really plays to the themes this week, Shawna, how we have like Saturn versus Neptune. Neptune, not so decisive, feeling it out. A little foggy, maybe a little confused. Saturn's like, okay, no, this is it. It's time to decide. It's time to put the hammer down, put the box, around what it is we're working with. I just drew out a box by myself with my fingers. No one can see that. And so I guess here, some words I'll leave this with is, do I carry on this path, or do I entertain a new project or something new? Because that can come up. All right, so some questions to take away for this Venus energy conjuncting Neptune and squaring Mars, and some of that first quarter moon action. I'd ask, with the potential for dreamy relations this week, how can I go with the flow of things without getting completely caught up in the illusion of it all? Can I keep the romance of the energy alive without losing my head? I would ask, is there a creative endeavor that I am currently trying to manifest? How can I take the lead and push myself to open to the potential of this spiritually directed inspiration and dare to express myself? And then lastly, I would ask, with potential for passions and or tensions to rise, can I communicate what it is I would like to see in my relations? Can I say what needs to be said with compassion in order to clear the air?
Nice.
All right, so let's move on to our next topic here, and that is Mercury, who's going to be in a sextile with Saturn, and then also conjunct Neptune, so another Neptune contact we have, and what we're titling Learning with Ease. So some exacts on that, we're going to have Mercury sextile Saturn on Wednesday, February 21st at 12:23 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8:23 p.m. Universal time. And then Thursday, the 22nd at 6:23 a.m. Aussie Eastern Standard Time. And that will happen at 6 degrees Pisces and Capricorn. And then we have Mercury conjunct Neptune on Sunday, February 25th at 4:26 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 12:26 p.m. Universal Time, and then 10:26 p.m. Aussie Eastern Standard Time. And that will happen at 13 degrees Pisces. So, Shawna, kick us in with your next quote.
So this again is by Alyssa Monks. What I wish I could learn now is how to enjoy it all while it's here. I'm so used to striving. I'm so used to pushing myself really hard. At this point, I think it would serve me and my work better to enjoy the process, surprises, and risks and ease up on my self-criticism. And so I thought this was really perfect for this combination because the planet Saturn is typically associated with anything where we're devoted to a long-term goal, we're committed to the process. Just the word commitment is very Saturnian. And the problematic side of this can be self-criticism or being too hard on oneself. And the other side of this is that we have Mercury making this contact to Saturn. Mercury is our mind and our thought process. So like these thoughts about commitment and process and doing things one step at a time. Mercury, our thought process, will also be conjunct Neptune. And Neptune is kind of like the exact opposite of Saturn. Neptune is like, let's, wash away those sandcastles. Let's not worry about it. Let's dream. Let's let that creativity flow. And, so I think I feel in this quote, how she's talking about balancing the striving and the process with enjoying it and letting it go and seeing how things happen. Like I really feel that in this aspect combination of Mercury making contacts to both Saturn and Neptune.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would take place, especially I love how the Saturn sextile happens before the Neptune conjunction. So maybe there's a point midweek where we're trying to get some things done. We're trying to, get our minds wrapped around where we're committing and putting boundaries and devoting ourselves and all that. And we might be a little hard on ourselves in order to get that done and feel like we feel the limitations, or we're thinking that there's all these limitations, or we're limited in some way. And then maybe when we have that conjunction with Neptune, there'll be a little bit more of a compassionate way of thinking about what we're going through, or more kind of it's just like an opening rather than the limitation. It's more of the kind of the expansive, ofness of like, Neptune kind of has like a Jupiter quality to it, except, Jupiter grows things. Neptune just doesn't have any boundaries. It's not necessarily that it's growing anything. It just doesn't put it into a clearly defined space. And so it's kind of like open and one, and why that moment works, because we might be in the moment might be in the moment at the moment, but then that moment fades, that moment passes, and it doesn't have that rigid boundary of Saturn. So I'm just wondering if, we're just kind of giving ourselves, dissolving some limits mentally in some way throughout the week with whatever it is that we're working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and so this is the thing, is we have this pile up in Pisces, like we've talked about, right? We have the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune there. And then we've got Saturn over in Capricorn trying to keep everything together and draw the boundaries. And while everything over in Pisces is like, let's just, go in the hot tub and take a nap and relax.
Take a nap in that hot tub. Hopefully you'll get back out.
Right, become a prune.
Oh yeah.
So my sense is that the Pisces and Neptune energy is going to win out on this situation. That is, and what I mean by that is that we'll probably be feeling the Neptune Pisces more than the Saturn. So we'll probably be feeling more of a sense of like wanting to just let things evolve naturally, to let things just play out, and to be more passive than to create the structure and create the form and be responsible, because the Mercury is making a sextile to Saturn. So if it were making a square, I'd be like, oh yeah, we may have to encounter some of these commitments and things like that, but it's a sextile. So it's more of like an opportunity to create, or an opportunity to draw form and boundaries and that kind of thing. And so, I think a part of how this could manifest at a more practical level is just not being super clear on the details or what it is that we want, or how to Mercury in Pisces is not necessarily like a very linear functioning mind. So we may feel like we have a lot of ideas and like a lot of really interesting insights, but then how does that apply to the practical day-to-day of life? And I don't think that we need to figure that out this week. This isn't the week for that. This is the week for, like we talked about earlier, like saying the thing that we need to say, but then also knowing that a part of how things are going to progress is going to be a bit unknown, and it may feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's very normal for this period of time.
Yeah, I would say it's a good observation. And it's quite possible that we'll have two different type of mental experiences through the week. Like you said, Shawna, Mercury in Pisces is not going to, really heed the call for intense concentration that Saturn might be asking of us to take advantage of. But that still doesn't mean that we can't put form around some of those abstract concepts or ideas that we're having right now, or we can concentrate more on what it is we're dreaming about or imagineering in some way. Or we can even maybe cut through the fog a little bit. We can take the time to try to pierce that veil and come back to reality just a little bit, or get a little more practical or grounded midweek. And maybe because we have to, maybe we're like, okay, I've been dreaming. This whole week has felt so romantic, but hold on, I gotta, kind of get some of that Saturn in there for a second. Because, it is mutable versus cardinal in a way. Our Mercury is immutable. It's going with the flow. It's, bouncing here and there. It's more in transition, versus that cardinal energy of Saturn that is here to begin and initiate and, start certain things. So there's kind of like a little bit of difference with that. But I think when we get to the end of the week and we have that Mercury conjunction with Neptune, anytime we have a conjunction, it's like the fusion of something. We're integrating something new into our lives, or a new, we're starting a cycle in a way. And Neptune, because it does speak to spirit and helps us access what it is that, is above, as above, so below, basically. We are, we might be intuiting, into our minds here, some spiritual direction in some way that is highlighting how we can use that Saturn and start to move into a direction that's aligned with, what it is that we're inspired by, or, kind of more of a spiritual bent or calling, or, what have you. That Mercury conjunct Neptune is really like that daydream believer. Like maybe we can start to believe in our daydreams in a way, because we have these Saturn aspects this week. We can start to look at those in more of a practical light. But like you said, Shawna, the work's not getting hammered in necessarily this week with all the Neptune, but maybe we're getting clues around, what it is we want to work on or move towards, or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely.
So it's interesting because we have Mercury and Saturn will be in that sextile the same day that Venus is going to be conjunct Neptune that we were just talking about in the earlier segment. And the moon is going to be in Taurus that day as well. And Taurus is that stable earth energy. So I think the moon is going to be helping us at that time. And it's going to be in a trine to Saturn. So I think a lot of midweek, we're going to feel more grounded because of that moon in Taurus, which will help with that Neptune energy. And then it's once we get in our heads later on in the week, when we might have that more of an airy mental quality going on. So, I mean, Shawna, what do you think about Mercury sextile Saturn mixed with Venus conjuncting Neptune, like the two energies put together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely, so this is this, and so when looking at the chart, I feeling the Neptune more so. Mercury, I think we're going to this idealistic, this where details just feel a little bit fun. Could be, more ungrounded and It also made me think of how can sometimes be, and Mercury's in there too. So it's Mercury, it's still pretty far away from Neptune. It's not super close, but it's in the mix there. And so I think, plus it's in Pisces. So I think that just we may be thinking about all of the possibilities and all of the future situations, like, oh, if I do this, what's going to happen, and that kind of thing. And there could be a certain element of like excitement and romanticism around it. There could be a certain element of fear or hesitation around it as well. And so I'm feeling like this week we may tend to feel a bit less grounded than normal. And kind of like, you know, I just get this image of like a person who's not grounded, like running from here to there. And so I would say that the more that we can err on the side of doing less and like really connecting with what it is that we're feeling on the inside, because I think that's also very Venus, Neptune, and yeah, our moon definitely helps with that too. The moon being in Taurus definitely helps us connect with, okay, like how are we feeling? How do we connect to this material world? How do we connect to our bodies? Because that feels like that may be the missing piece, and the piece to focus on really is like the physicality of how we're feeling in every single moment.
That's a good point, because, you know, we don't have a whole lot of Earth going on right now. And really that Earth is being represented by Saturn hanging out in Capricorn, and then this passing moon. So yeah, that's definitely a good tip to kind of get back into that groundedness, or to merge, you know, that kind of dreaminess with reality and what's here, and, you know, all that. And, you know, Mercury sextile Saturn, you know, same day we got Venus conjunct Neptune, and we're talking about the first quarter moon in Gemini are rising or about to get here. It could be an opportunity to speak some type of piece, or speak what it is that you would like to see, you know, a boundary put in place, or what you want to devote yourself to, or like sharing that kind of, you know, that. Well, because you know, Saturn wants, we keep talking about, you know, merging. Okay, so we have this merging theme going on with all these Pisces thing, and that Saturn element is commitment. So maybe we're talking about some commitments here. Maybe we have to clarify certain idealism or idealizations that are going on, or maybe even just say, you know, what it is we hope for, that we were dreaming about with another, whether it's a relationship or any type of relationship, or you have to say something to another person. And that square to Mars, Venus squaring Mars that we talked about in the previous segment, might give us kind of that energy and that passion to kind of speak our piece in some way, especially since it's in Sagittarius, which is more of a, you know, kind of, ideological energy. So we might be sharing what we're thinking, and what we want to commit ourselves to, and how we're feeling about other people. So it could be a great time really to kind of strengthen bonds in a way. Mm-hmm. So that's up there for, you know, for consideration, but ultimately we just might find ourselves back on that beach, ready for a romantic stroll in some way, or doing something that lifts up our spirits, especially this weekend. Because, you know, whenever Neptune's around, we might just not have the energy, or, you know, as much will, you know, because it has that kind of ego disillusion that happens when Neptune comes around. So we're not really pushing as much as we normally would. And so, yeah, this weekend might just be kick those feet up, you know, listen to some music, play some music, you know, escape into your mind and your thoughts, and, or the passion of someone else's caress, you know, in some way. Yeah. But I guess the last thing I'll say about this before we move on to the tarot is that we're having that Mercury conjunct Neptune the same day as Venus square Mars. So it's interesting how both of these segments are lining up with the other segments. And on that day, and we're talking about, you know, Saturday, Sunday, we have the moon in Cancer, which is going to be opposing that Saturn. So I'm just wondering kind of if we're going to either feel limitations in relationships with that opposition, or we're going to be embracing these things, embracing this devotion or dedication or that commitment that we're putting in place with that passion for other people, our relationship, or, devoting ourselves to our creative faculties and, the projects that we have going on. So Shawna, what do you think about that moon in Cancer late on in the week and opposing Saturn, how it might affect things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've actually been thinking about the moon being in the sign of Cancer now that we have, in general, now that we have Saturn freshly in Capricorn. So that changes the whole vibe of a moon in Cancer, because now the nature of the moon being in Cancer in general over the next 2 or so years is that it's always going to oppose Saturn. And so the moon is how we feel. It's what like really drives our feelings from day to day. It's kind of like that flux of like, oh, today is a good day, or I feel grumpy today, or I feel, silly or whatever. So when it's in the sign of Cancer, we're more focused on feeling nurtured and comforted, and we're typically more in touch with our feelings in general, regardless of the phase. And Saturn is about commitment. It's about devotion. It's about responsibility. And it is also about limitation. Saturn literally helps us create things, because it's like, all right, what are you going to make here? Like you gotta cut some stuff. You gotta contain this thing. And so I'm thinking that when the moon is opposite Saturn, when it's in the sign of Cancer over the weekend, there may be more of a sense of like really feeling like, what is it that I'm committed to? What is it that, how do I feel about my commitments? Mm-hmm. It's definitely like that feeling element of the sign of Cancer is still there, but it takes on maybe a more serious tone, and it's more around like, what are my limitations? How do I feel about my limitations? Do I feel safe and secure and structured, which is all Saturn? Or do I feel like someone's breathing down my neck and I feel constricted and like with no options, which is also like the problematic side of Saturn. So I would just notice, and I think that really depends on what's happening at an individual level, like already. And so I would note, like, those are all good. If it does feel constricted, maybe that's something to work with a little bit, but that is going to be more pronounced this weekend for sure.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And that is definitely a possibility. And who knows, we might like those constrictions, those commitments. And it might have been something we integrated earlier on in the week that we were talking about or brought up in conversation. And so now either that's being implemented, or we're sitting with that, or getting the bird's eye view of it all. But yeah, no, it's interesting. And that's a good point, Shawna, how when we have a long-term planet, that a slow moving planet move into another sign, that affects the moon every month as it makes that contact. And so, every time the moon, every time it's been in Cancer for the last 7 years, we've had our Pluto opposition. And we're like, oh, here comes Pluto again, And so now we have kind of like a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, with our Saturn and then Pluto every time the moon moves into Cancer now. So, and Cancer, the moon is ruled by Cancer. So it's already a very strong moon placement when we have our monthly transit through Cancer, and our emotions get lit up and we become ultra sensitive in many ways. But we're also able to then really feel our feelings and that emotional radar and that kind of soul radar that happens. So fruitful transits with the moon in Cancer each month. However, they might not always be easy because we're working through a lot of things with these long-term planets. So that's a good point to bring up. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these tarot cards, because they're interesting as well. We're getting a lot of like kind of Earth themes, even though there's not a whole lot of Earth. So who knows? I guess Saturn is just still so poignant, even when he's the only one representing Earth here. But I drew the 3 of Pentacles as the focus, and the 8 of Cups as the grounding for these Mercury transits. And so I see here there seems to be an element of sacrifice regarding what we're working on or planning in some way. So the 3 of Pentacles is working on something. It's planning something. It's dedicated to something. It's, the work we do every day. and the work we do when we're stabilizing a project. And then the Eight of Cups is about when we are emotionally walking away from something or sacrificing or letting things go. So I'm wondering if, we have to sacrifice regarding what we're working on or what we're planning in some way, or perhaps it's the flip side and we need to let go of something emotionally in order for the work to begin or to even continue, especially since we were talking about the Seven of Pentacles earlier and that stopping point of like, what's next? What am I doing? Where am I progressing here? So Shawna, what do you think about the Three of Pentacles and the Eight of Cups getting together?
Yeah, so these cards definitely speak of something changing within a commitment, which is so appropriate what we're talking about. Something changing within a commitment or a collaboration, and it's interesting because I think these cards are kind of like you're saying, Mel, like a follow-up to the previous cards from the previous segment, where we're like, okay, like what have we created? What have we created? How do we feel about it? Is there something that needs to be changed? And maybe the answer is yes, like there needs to be something that is done differently within a relationship or a collaboration, or even just like how we interact with people in a group setting as well. Like, because it's the Three of Pentacles. It's not the Two of Pentacles. It's the three. So it's like this could even be like retooling how we feel about our role in a community, or I don't know, maybe it's even like the literal workplace. And then the Eight of Cups is, like there's a certain sense of like walking away or letting something go. But I think the bigger thing of that is the emotional tone around this card is there is a certain sense of like being sad about it or maybe being disappointed. And so I'm curious to see how we feel, because I think it also kind of speaks to the fact that we'll have this, like we were talking about the moon being in Cancer, and moon in Cancer opposite Saturn, like, that could be a more somber tone. And so what I would say about the Eight of Cups also is that just because we're disappointed about something or it didn't work out, quite in the way that we wanted with our idealistic visions, which is quite possible. That doesn't mean that we that doesn't mean that we need to get stuck in that hopelessness kind of feeling. It's like, it's okay to feel that disappointment, but that disappointment, like, I don't think that's going to be super intense forever. Like, this is more like, like, okay, the thing is, like, it feels like more of a confrontation of reality almost in a way. And then the fallout that happens after that sometimes.
No, I like that. That's a good way of looking at it. Because the Eight of Cups can live in something that just emotionally that this isn't working any longer. And it's always, looking back and kind of have that sad face, but it's like, just walk. It's like, looking back at the pillar, what's the old Sodom and Gomorrah? Is that where they look back and they turn into pillars of salt? I don't know.
I don't know
much about the Bible, but I do remember that as a kid. I was like, wow, that is intense. But it's the idea. Keep walking. Don't look back. Like we're moving into new territory here. So there's seems to be this theme of dedication versus letting go in some way. So, hey, who knows, we might need to commit to some new values in our work, especially since we're having a Venus week, or how we work with other people. We talked about that Gemini first quarter moon and how, we say things to other people, how we express ourselves and whether that's above board or not. So hopefully we can start fresh and move on to some better things in our work life or whatever it is that we're dedicated to, because that's essentially what that Three of Pentacles is bringing up. All right, so some questions to take away from Mercury sextiling Saturn and also conjuncting Neptune. I would ask myself, with the theme of dedication versus letting go arriving this week, what end of the spectrum do I find myself? Is there something I need to sacrifice in my work life? Or is there an emotional sacrifice needed to get to work? I would ask, What is my imagination intuiting at this time? Are there any subtle clues that are leading me in a particular direction? Can I cut through any confusion or doubt to devote myself to this inspiration? And then lastly, I would ask, is there something calling to me that I need to concentrate on? Can I find the balance between pushing and striving versus going with the flow and the path of least resistance?
Nice.
All right, so let's move on to our last segment here. And last but certainly not least, we have the Sun in Pisces, who will be in a sextile to Saturn in Capricorn, and what we're titling Success and Follow Through. And some exacts on that, it'll be happening on Sunday, February 25th at 9:46 a.m. Pacific time, which is 5:46 p.m. Universal time, and then Monday, the 26th at 3:46 a.m. Aussie Eastern Standard Time. And that sextile will happen at 7 degrees Pisces and Capricorn. So, Shawna, kick us in with your last quote.
So this quote is from Alyssa Monks. For me, success is simply getting into the flow in the studio and making work that blows my mind. The rest doesn't define success for me. Learn what grit is and then embody it. Figure out how to stick with what you're doing and follow through all the way. And I was like, oh, this is totally a Sun-Saturn situation. Because, so this is the thing is, we've talked a little bit about Saturn throughout this whole entire episode. And the thing that I really like about this quote is that she says, learn what grit is and then embody it. And I think this is kind of a concept that I think about for myself whenever I think about Saturn and Pluto also, but particularly Saturn, because Saturn gets a bad rap and people are like, Saturn's fucking up my life and it's making things hard. And, we kind of tend to have a Debbie Downer view on things that are Saturn, because Saturn is typically associated with limitation and restriction and responsibility. And I mean, that's no fun, right? Like, who wants to be responsible? And at the same time, Saturn also gives us longevity. It gives us it gives us a really strong and solid foundation that is really fantastic after we've spent all of that time with the grit and sticking with it and following through. So what I think about a lot is, okay, how can I embody that energy of Saturn? How can I become like this, and how can I have this energy that is about follow through and commitment and like proactively creating that structure for myself versus having that imposed on me in other ways. And so all of that to say, I really like this particular quote for this aspect, and it's a sextile. So it's like an opportunity where we can tap into this idea of follow through for success. It's not going to hit us over the head, but we can think about embodying it in order to take advantage of the gifts that Saturn has to offer.
Yes, and that's a very good point, because this is an opening sextile to Saturn. So this is the first major aspect that's happened since we had our conjunction back in Capricorn season. I think it was 0 degrees Capricorn when the conjunction happened. And so this is our first opportunity to kind of lay those boundaries in and get that grit. And I like the quote just for that reason, Shawna, and bringing up the idea of grit. And it's the grit to have that follow through. But also if we're talking about limitation and how Saturn can get a bad rap, it's through those limitations and kind of those hard knocks and those, boundaries that we have to live within is where we get our grit. Because, the strongest people that are out there and able to, they have weathered life circumstances. And, Saturnian people, you can go one way. You can either, fall into the depression of it all and feeling limited, which doesn't really speak to this sextile per se. I'm just talking about Saturn in general. Or you can be like, okay, I've worked through those hard knocks. I've learned a lot along the way. I'm a stronger person for it. And so that's kind of the blessing of Saturn there, is that you gain that grit through limitation, and then that constant devotion that you keep, despite any setbacks or mountains you have to climb, that makes you the person who you are, like that's the beauty in that work and that true grit, I think. So I really like the quote for that reason personally.
Yeah. And one thing to build on what you were just saying too, is that the experiences that we have that are based in Saturn kind of things, like that grit and enduring hardship and being responsible when the situation calls for it, and like doing the things that, that are the right, quote unquote, the right thing to do, even though they're not always pleasant or convenient or comfortable. Those are experiences that people can never take away from us. And
they're cemented.
Yeah.
They're in there.
Yeah, they're in there, and they become a part of our character. And so I would, that's something that I would think about this week too, is that, again, it's a sextile, so it's not something that we have to do, but like what's the character that you're building for yourself this week, I think that feels especially important because we've talked about in this episode about speaking up and sharing where we need to, and the idealism and all of this. And so it's like, okay, how does all of that fit in with personal character and what's important? And Saturn's also about like long-term goals and visions and these kinds of things. So what is it that we're building on an external level, but then also on an internal level as well?
I like that, Shawna, and I like how this is really all pairing together. As we've talked through a lot of the transits now, you tend to get ideas towards the end. You're like, I like how Saturn is really playing into this Neptunian type of week and giving a balance to this, overly, elusive type of dreamy type of energy. So, I think Saturn is a blessing. Saturn is a blessing here. So, don't say that too often, but it is. And we just spoke of reasons why it could be a blessing on many levels. So yeah, what are we dedicating ourselves to? What are we putting together here? What boundaries are we giving ourselves? Because that's the thing with creativity. And if we have this kind of Neptunian week, I find that, when you give yourself limitation or something, a framework to work around, because that's the thing with Saturn, is it's a framework. We have to box in how far we can go with something. And when we're working with creativity, chances are, like leaving a full canvas is nice. Whatever comes to you, put it down there, with a paintbrush, like draw it out. But at some point you have to formulate that idea, and you're like, okay, well, I drew a person and I'm seeing that sunset come up, so it's going to be on the beach. And you're laying down these limitations of that picture that you're drawing and that vision that you're having. Because we're all these planets in Pisces, we're all having visions right now. We are more in tune with the direction of our lives, and the fact that it's the right before Aries season where we kind of start those new chapters, that spring type of energy. We are in this transitory state, but it's a very spiritual one that we're able to tap into, this undercurrent of vibes that can help direct us somewhere. So how are we limiting ourselves in that vision and that picture that we're painting? Because if we decide it's like, okay, well, I drew some water, so I can only draw a beach scene now. That's all. I can't go any further. I can't now draw a mountain. Well, maybe you could, but I'm trying using an example. And so how can we find ourselves that even more in a creative realm once we put certain limitations around something? Like, say I want to be a writer, or like I'm ready to take the first steps to, writing my book. And if you're like, okay, well, every Thursday I'm going to sit down from 10 to 1 and write. If you do that and you dedicate yourself, you're going to find that inspiration and that creativity like kicking in, even though you might not feel it when you sit down at Thursday at 10 a.m. You're like, oh no, I'm not feeling it. But if you give yourself that time and space and that limitation, you're going to find that your creativity flowers and it evolves within those boundaries. So we have the we have the ability to do these things right now. So Shawna, what do you think about all that? Whatever I just said.
Yeah, all of that.
All that.
So I'm reminded of a certain book and a certain part of a book that I've read. It's about the chakras. It's called The Wheels of Life by Anodea Judith. Mm. And I like it because she was talking, she was talking about the root chakra and how the root chakra is related to all things that are Saturn, really, about limitation. And she's like, listen, I can't write this book, like, you know, what you're talking about. I can't literally write this book unless I decide, okay, this is what I'm going to say. This is how I'm going to say it. I'm going to use these specific words. All of those actions create limitation. It's like the moment that we say yes to something else, we have to say no to something else. And the moment we say no, we can say yes. And so it's like, if we're always entertaining all of the possibilities and we're never saying no to anything, we're never creating a limitation, if we're never shutting down any one thing, then everything's always open-ended and we can't ever really create anything. Mm. And so that I think that's the beauty of Saturn. That's the helpful side of Saturn is it's like, yeah, we have to, at some point, there needs to be a decision or a limitation in order to create, in order to enjoy life. And so I think that my sense is that we'll be feeling more of that kind of energy from this Saturn aspect, from the Sun sextile Saturn, because it's a softer aspect. It's a more quote unquote helpful aspect. And it's competing with like the Pisces party over there. So
yes, it is. It really is.
Yeah. So I would say, I think that, I would even think about like leaning into this Saturn energy and like, yeah, where can we embrace limitation, and like that can actually be a springboard for all of the other beautiful things that we're creating and the connections that we're making in our life.
I like that. And it makes total sense. And once again, why this might be a blessing for this week, all the Saturn energy, especially an opportunity with Saturn. And chances are we might feel that, because we have that Taurus moon, midweek when this sextile starts to gain a little influence. So we might, be able to embrace that stability of Taurus, of the Taurus moon, where we're like, okay, well, no, I want to get down to earth here and be practical and get some, stability around what it is I'm doing, put some boundaries in there in order to do so. And then that first quarter moon in Gemini rolls around and we might have some tensions with it, or we might have to express what that boundary or limit or structure is with, to another person, or enforce that within yourself and how you think about that and how you limit your, yourself in some ways. And then we're going to have, when it's exact, we're going to have that moon in Cancer once again opposing Saturn. So basically at the end of the week, Saturday, Sunday, mostly Sunday, especially here in the United States, we're going to be, have that Cancer moon opposing Saturn with the Sun sextile Saturn, Mercury conjunct Neptune, and Venus square Mars all on the same day. So basically there's elements of every single one of these things, transits and segments that we've talked about that is going to pretty much apex at the end of this week, where we're going to feel that passion arrive with that Venus, square to Mars. Our mental faculties are connecting with that creativity of Neptune. And that sextile gives us the ability with Saturn to try to put some boundaries around that, or put some framework or some structure. So Shawna, I really think there's some definite creative energy that can come out this weekend that we can really, take that malleableness of it and kind of like start to form it like Play-Doh or something.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Play-Doh when you were saying that.
That's funny. Yeah. So, what do you think about that kind of like that moon? Yeah. Us being able to, form it, get that creative form going.
Yeah. So I think that, the thing about the moon being in the sign of Cancer is that Cancer is a cardinal sign like Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
And Cancer's like, yeah, like let's get some stuff going. Cardinal signs are all about starting things. There's a certain
already started.
Yeah, there's a leadership quality. And even though people typically see the sign of Cancer as being more subdued or quiet or submissive, that can be the case. There is there can be more of a passive quality to Cancer, but when Cancer energy is focused on something, when there is a goal or a desire, which I think that we'll be feeling, then yes, it's very like, okay, let's go forward, let's move, let's create. And so, yeah, I like the visual that keeps coming to mind is where there's rainfall, and then all of the rain, like it washes down the mountain, and then it finds its way to these little streams. And then at some point there's like this big stream where the sides are the sides of the river are contained by the earth. And then the more that it flows, the stronger that the sides are, the more that there can be this strong and solid flow of energy. There can be a solid flow of creative energy, of mental energy, of just like life flowing in general when we create that structure at the sides.
Shawna, you just took me on a journey. And you wonder why she does meditation. I'm like picturing it. I'm following the stream. I was in my own little things. I'm like, it makes total sense. It makes total sense, especially if you have a raging river that is flowing. You know, you got to have those boundaries and kind of keep that.
You might need to build a dam. You know?
Yes, build that dam. Get your inner beaver out this week. And no, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So, all right. So let's talk about some of these tarot cards, because once again, I think it's really pairing into that kind of self-leadership. And like you were just saying with the cardinal sign, Shawna, and the fact that we have that, moon in Cancer and Capricorn, or Saturn in Capricorn, and that initiating leadership energy. Well, I drew the King of Wands as the focus and the Fool as the grounding. And and any type of king is, and we tapped in earlier to the energy of the Emperor when we were talking about, Venus square Mars in that first segment. We're back to that leadership energy. We're back into something that speaks of mastery, or perhaps starting the path of mastery, since we have the Fool involved, which makes a lot of sense for this opening sextile to Saturn as we're starting a new cycle for the year, and we have this opportunity to act and to embrace limitation in some way and to get certain things done, or at least get a framework around them. And because it's in Wands, the King of Wands, both cards kind of speak to being willing to take a risk in some way, or to use one's authority, and to really embrace a new level of confidence in some way. And that kind of speaks to the idea of Mars being in Sagittarius right now, and being in that square with Venus. If we're talking about being willing to take a risk and kind of step up and use that fiery energy, or in that leadership energy in some way, kind of like an instinctual authority to move upon. So yeah, there's really, once again, that kind of king mastery energy. So Shawna, what do you think about the King of Wands and the Fool getting together?
Yeah, so I like this combination. I think it does speak to this encouragement to embrace our own. It makes me think of kind of what we're talking about with the moon being in the sign of Cancer. It's like, yeah, like embrace your ability to pull shit off, even if you don't know exactly what you're doing all of the time. Like that's really like it is. It also reminds me of one of the big themes of that book, The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho, where he says that when a person moves toward their personal legend, he calls it the personal legend, but it's basically like, their purpose or their dreams or any kind of long-term goal that a person has. When a person moves toward their personal legend, then the entire universe conspires to help that person. And so I think like I really get that theme from these cards, because it's like, yeah, the Fool is braving new territory. There's a certain sense of inexperience, but enthusiasm with whatever it is. Like, you know, he's got his little knapsack and he's like, all right, I got everything I need in this little bag and I'm going to go do it. And it's like, well, do you really have everything you need? Who knows? Probably not. But the King of Wands to me says, but it's okay. You know, there is that inner authority that's there always, no matter what. So it's definitely an encouragement to take a risk and to trust oneself.
And I love that. That's a great example, Shawna, with the alchemist, especially in this Neptune versus Saturn week, because we might feel that calling, we might feel that inspiration or that vision, or, you know, more of a spiritual aspect that is essentially calling us to put form around it. And yeah, that really speaks not only to these cards, but the whole, you know, this week's episode in general. So I like that comparison. And you know, with inner authority, that's the thing, is like, the Fool might not have all it needs in the knapsack, like you're saying, but if we have that authority and that ability to direct ourselves and to take control of our lives in certain ways, when we come up to a situation that we gotta need whatever's not in the sack, we're going to find it. We're going to take control of it and try to find what it is that we need at that particular moment. But sometimes you just got to get started, or you just got to, you know, begin that path in order to find out what you need in the long run. Because you might have something in the sack you don't even need to begin with. And so we use that as we go along. But ultimately, I think that, you know, the king wants us to initiate new ideas in some way. Especially with all these Mercury transits this week, and potentially sell them to others, which really speaks to the first quarter moon in Gemini, where we might need to express ourselves in some way or share certain ideas. You know, so we can kind of latch to, I'm hoping we can kind of latch to a better idea or a version of ourselves to develop within all this. And who knows, we might be able to inspire other people with our own inspiration, because that's the whole idea of the King of Wands too, is that it is this, you know, masculine, assertive energy that is here to inspire and share what one thinks and what one feels, you know, especially philosophically. Once again, we're back to, you know, Mars and Sagittarius and that, you know, kind of philosophical belief type of energy and acting upon those, you know, ideals and you know, framework of some sort. So it's very inspirational pair as well. So I'm hoping we can tap into that.
Definitely.
All right. So some questions to take away for the sun sextiling Saturn. I would ask myself, what does my follow-through ability look like? Do I naturally take the reins of my life and do what is needed to keep my eyes on the prize? Or do I tend to be all talk and no dedication? The Gemini moon had me thinking of that. I would ask, what does success look like for me? What is that vision of success currently calling to manifest? Can I take the opportunity to dedicate myself to that vision and prompt myself into action? And then lastly, I would ask, what responsibilities need attending to in my life? With the theme of practicality versus illusion this week, can I stay grounded in reality without taking the magic out of life?
Nice.
All right, Shawna. So what have we learned this week? Oh my goodness.
Lots.
Well, we've learned that we are getting in the flow, essentially. We are getting in the flow and going with the flow this week. And so we have Venus, who is conjuncting Neptune and squaring Mars. And so we're going to be flowing with possibly some intense romantic type of energy going on. And passion is going to be aroused. That will challenge us in some way. So we'll see how that goes. We have that first quarter moon that is probably going to have us speaking up. A lot of communications towards the end of the week here. We learned that Mercury, once again, communications, is going to be sextiling Saturn and conjunct Neptune. And we're going to be learning with ease on how we can dedicate ourselves and commit ourselves to certain things and maybe a vision that we have. And then lastly, we learned that the sun will sextile Saturn, and success and follow-through is key here. So what framework are you putting in place to see those visions come to light? So Shawna, I know you have an excellent action item for our peeps, so please share.
I do. So this week, action item is to do a daily ritual to channel your energy. So this will look different for everyone, radically different for everyone based on your lifestyle, what you like, all that good stuff. The detail of what this is not important. What's important is I want each of us to pick something that creates that structure, that like some kind of daily structure. And it can be something more general, or it can be related to something that you are focused on in your life right now. So, for example, if you are focused on wanting to bring more peace and calm into your life, maybe you do a 5-minute meditation every day. If you're more focused on your physical vitality and you're like wanting to stay in shape and follow up on a New Year's resolution to be more healthy, maybe you go for a 10-minute walk at lunch or after work or before work or something like that. If you're like, Shawna, I don't have time for all that nonsense, maybe you just, instead of like gulping down your coffee and like getting ready for work in the morning or, whatever, maybe you just have like a few minutes where you have your coffee or your tea in a quiet place. So like anything, but what I'm really looking for is like some kind of structured thing that's done every single day to like set that tone of symbolically committing to something and symbolically creating form around something every day.
I like that, Shawna. That's a good action item this week, especially with all that Saturn. Let's put some form around it.
Yeah, definitely. And another way to get involved is if you enjoy listening to the podcast, you can become a patron to show your appreciation and to get our really cool show notes. You can become a patron by going to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com. And you can also connect with us on Facebook and Instagram under Feminine Principle Podcast.
Yes. We'd love to have you there. So please feel free to reach out or share with us if you're doing the action item or you're taking a listen or working with the cards or just want to say hi. Feel free to give us a shout out on any one of those platforms, and we'd love to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But where can you find us? Where can you find us individually? Well, you can find me over at energeticprinciples.com, and you can find me at Energetic Principles on Instagram and Facebook, where I have my daily astro alerts, little ticker tape that goes on in the stories of Instagram. So if you just want to get a quick refresher through the week of some of the things that we talk about, I have like a 15-second, this is what's going on. Take it for what you will. And then I'm also offering readings. I can do either via Zoom, or if you're here in San Diego or willing to travel, I'd love to do one, set something up in person. But I have my Tarot Meets Astro consultation, which is an hour-long consultation where we basically, much like the podcast, we look at the planets and we look at the cards and kind of put together all that into a big picture of what's going on in your life right now. So if you're interested in that, I have that available. So Shawna, where can they find you and connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube under Neo Feminine Astrology. And the latest thing that I have right now that I'm working on is I have my meditation membership. And so that is a monthly membership where when you sign up, you get a guided meditation that's about 10 or 15 minutes every single week. And it's based on the astrology of the week. So I made that because I like making guided meditations, and people seem to like them as well. So it's a nice guide to go week by week. And if you don't want to think, you just want to meditate, but you don't want it to be too complicated. So I have information about that on my Instagram and Facebook under Neo Feminine Astrology.
Which would actually be perfect for this week if we want to talk about meditation and getting a ritual going in the Neptune week. That would be a perfect way to start for any of our listeners if you want to take advantage of Shawna's offering. That's a great way to take a little bit of time and dedication, but still have that kind of spiritual connection vibe going on. So yes, get in there and meditate. Meditate. No, I can't remember what I was going to say. All right, moving on. So, Shawna, any last words for our listeners this week?
Sending lots of love and asking that if you enjoy this podcast, share it with a friend. Don't keep us a secret, and help us connect with more people. We would really appreciate that.
Yes, we would love to get out there more, and as they say, sharing is caring. And if you do care and you'd like to share your thoughts, we'd love to hear. And if you have any type of reviews that you would like to give on iTunes or on Facebook or wherever they let you do that, Yelp, I don't know if that works, but we'd love to hear what you have to say. And any type of 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated because it'll help us get out there more. And we want to get out there more, so we appreciate your help with that. So all right, everybody, I'm wishing you a fabulous week as well as we get started into this waxing energy of the moon. We're taking action. It should be a fruitful week. So we thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.